Hello! Today we'll be finding out what's in this quite large box from Eachine. But just before we get into that, a quick reminder, please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it, comment down below, please subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to click that little bell icon in the corner which will tell you when I'm uploading stuff. So what is in the box? It is, as it says on the corner, the Tyro129. The Tyro series seems to have been going for a while now, doesn't it? Started with the Tyro99, the 5-inch quad. There's a lot of swapping out to do with components to make that better. The Tyro79, a lot better, little 3-inch quad, and I think there was a Tyro109. I don't know if that was a 6-inch or a 5-inch with refined bits. What this is a 7-inch quad. They've sort of hit upon the little trend at the moment for people building larger quads, having more of an explore, longer flights, and they've even bundled it with a GPS. And if we open the box, it looks like this. So let's have a close-up and let's go through the parts we get, and then, well, basically we'll put it together and see what we can do with it. Okay, here we are. So let's find out what's in the box in more detail. It's so big it can't even fit in frame. What I might do is just take it away and get stuff out to show to you. If you can hear banging and drilling and awful noises, I've got some workmen doing some stuff on my fascias and guttering. It's really noisy, but they're here for several days and I need to get on with stuff, so, you know, there you go. Let me get this out of the way and I'll take stuff out one at a time and bring it forwards. So the first things I saw and I picked up are these motors. They're colour coded on top for depending on which direction they want to go, and these are 2507 1800 kV motors. I was trying to think of a particular order to get these out in, but it's all buried. So here's the ESC board. It has a capacitor on it already. I am not sure exactly what the spec is on here. I'll put it up on screen because I haven't checked. And here is the flight controller. It's an F4, looks like an omnibus type. Haven't checked once again. All got ports on it. Not an awful lot to solder, which is never a bad thing. Again, I'll check out what that is when I actually come to configure it. Then we have the camera. This is a Caddx Turbo Micro F2. Not bad. Not as bad as the EOS 2s, so, but not fantastic. Sort of a basic cheap CMOS camera, but still probably better than the stuff they were doing in the first one at least. Then in this packet there's a little rebadged BN220 GPS for the Tyro129. Isn't that interesting? They started giving you GPS to build and self-build quads now. Little GoPro session holder, nice little squidgy TBU thing. An antenna looks a little bit like a TBS Triumph, but has the Eachine logo on, so it's not. Some little spanners made out of the same material as the frame, an MMCX to SMA adapter, a whole heap of screws and risers and things like that. Some heat shrink. On the last one, this went round the arms and kind of enclosed the wires. A strange little gun. I don't understand why we get these. Some Eachine battery straps. The bit that works as the battery holder and goes underneath the frame. Cables. This is pretty much for ESC board to flight controller, main power, camera to board, GPS to board, all the bits. Hopefully they're right this time. On the 79 they had some weirdness with the camera, so you had to figure out with the cable to make it work. Cable ties, got some metal risers and what looks like a piece of TPU to take the antennas out, I'm guessing that's for. This looks like the frame itself, so let's get this out of the bag and actually see what we've got. Okay, so in the frame we have obviously a centre section there. We have 4 of these legs. That looks pretty thick. Looks like about 4 or 5 mil. I'll check it out later. Some more of those. This is going to be, I guess, the top section. Don't know. Figure it out later. That's probably for the camera holder, and that's going to be the other side of that. And that bit, which is, that might be bottom and top. I don't know. We'll find that bit out. Got some props. These are decent looking props actually. Cyclone 7056, so Dell props there. Quite big, these 7-inch ones. Obviously, 7 inches. Sticky sheet. And trapped down the bottom was this VTX. Not exactly sure what that is. I did not look at the specs before I started looking at this. Now, that is what you get in the box. You'll notice there's no instructions. There never are. You need to download them and look at them. Generally speaking, in the previous models, they've been pretty rubbish. It's kind of a question of like looking at the picture and deciding how it connects together. That said, most of it is a fairly easy build. My intention here is again not to show the whole build process. If you take a look at the original Tyro129 I did, that shows a lot more. The 79 I then sort of showed little bits and bobs how I did it stage by stage, and I'm gonna probably do the same again. So I'm gonna not show the intricate like solder this bit to that bit. I'm just going to show you the before and afters as we go. So let's get the instructions sorted, have a look at those, see if they're any good, and we can get going with it. So stage one of my build, I simply put the motors on to the arms. I did this for two reasons. One, to see if these enclosed things was the idea that they'd go on there, and it feels like that's what they wanted to do. But that's not going to fit. It feels to me they've used the same pieces as they did in the original Tyro129. You can sort of see it around there. The pictures I got on the website show a sort of more general sort of wrapped thing, which they don't have here. The other reason was to see how long these wires were. These are really horrible wires. Yet again, it's this old stiff wire that sort of holds its position instead of the nice silicone stuff. But yeah, the thing about the length of the wires is, I thought what I'd do, I'd get the arms on so I could just try and mock up exactly what would happen, because normally I'd take the ESC wires and I'd go around the post and onto the contacts, but there's just not enough wire there. So what I'm going to do is go straight up and onto the contacts that way instead in my soldering job. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the arms on, put the right screws in to mount the ESC, and then I'll solder the wires on there as the start point. I think that's the most of the soldering we've got really. There might be something on the flight controller just to set S-bus or PPM, there usually is, but it's mainly just these motors. I should explain again that the instructions were fairly terrible, but it looks like it's a case of the legs get sandwiched in between this bottom X and then this longer bottom plate, and it seems like the idea the GPS is going to fit here, and so the main shorter plate then fits on top, and that space is sort of left bare here so it doesn't block. So one thing I noticed when building is this screw sort of sits around in that, and you wouldn't really want to secure like that with a plastic riser bar. In the bag a bit are these little things. What are they? Captive nuts, captive holes that you need to get in there. They don't exactly want to go in easily. You might have to give them a gentle hammering, but obviously gentle. Just tap 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 until you get it lined up, because you don't want to break that carbon. Again, it's not the instructions, and it really should be, because although it might seem fairly obvious, these sort of kits do appeal to first time builders, and I know first time builders really like a bit more explicit instructions in what they're doing, but just get them in until they're nice and flush there and straight. Okay, quick update. Soldering is done and looks horrendous. I don't know what it is with these Tyros, but I can never get a clean joint there, so it's just horrible, lots of solder on. There's also a little bit just here to solder across to say it's S-bus. Now this doesn't come with a receiver. I'm going to put on an R9 I've got spare. I thought that fitted in. I've also noticed I've made a mistake here, and that I've followed the colour coding from the last one. So this would normally be rotating this way, but if you actually look, which I should have done earlier, it says this is, can't focus on it. Well, anyway, it says this is CCW and this is clockwise, and of course that's going to go inwards. I can fix it by doing props out, of course, just to make the screws do up nicely. So the next thing I did is basically plug stuff in. So I've got the ESC to the flight controller there, and then it was a case of sort of working out what's what. That's going to be the camera, this is going to be the VTX, that's going to be the GPS, which is going to sit on the back here. This is going to go to the receiver. Obviously I'll snip that off and do stuff. Yeah, and that's it, not too much more to do. Okay, so another update. I've just put that on loosely just to show you where we've got room and where we haven't got room, because it's really weird. We've got loads of room there, and then in the front bit here. If I just take this top section off because it's not screwed on yet. The camera mount has absolutely loads of room around it like that. But the things that didn't have room is this piece of TPU for the antenna here. We had to get rid of the screw that came with it, else there wasn't enough thread. You see how we've had to sort of curl right around because the gap is here to here, and the GPS really gets squashed in because it has to get on there, but there's the capacitor in the way there, and there's that antenna there, so that's a bit tricky to get in there and think it's getting a bit blocked really. But yeah, the only thing I've got to do now is attach my receiver, put the top on, figure out how to do my antennas. There is a bit in here, you'll see there's these little 2 holes there if you've got regular FreeSky antennas. I'm aiming to do a sort of vertical dipole for this. That would make it better and give it better range basically. So yeah, that's the last bit to do, and then get it on Maiden Flight and try and sort the rest out.
Well, just before I'd do any setup, I thought I'd go into Beta Flight and see what was going on. And it looks like there's a little bit of setup done here. If I go into ports, you'll see that we've got the GPS enabled on UART 1 and Serial RX on UART 2. I don't know if this is supposed to be like a VTX that allows smart audio. Obviously that hasn't been set anywhere, and thinking about it, yeah, there's actually not any additional leads coming from that, so that's definitely not there. Configuration wise, I'll be adding mode to stop, 8K 2K loop, not bad. Arming angles 180, which I like, set for S-Bus. The GPS section is initialized, which is good. Beacon set up, some minor changes here. Pid tuning, something's been done here. It's got a really scary yaw rate of like 1263 degrees, which sounds frightening. I'm not sure if this is because it's a bigger quad or something, but it sounds a bit scary to me. We'll have to see how that goes. Receiver I haven't set up yet, but this is on TAER, which obviously is wrong for me. I'm on AETR, but I'll sort that out later. Modes, they have set up some. They've got an arm, angle, a failsafe, which is a weird thing to set up, I always find. GPS rescue and beeper, so they were certainly thinking about GPS, and I thought I was expecting big things from the OSD, but this is the default OSD. So you've got warnings here, your GPS speed here, your GPS sats, your height, and your home arrow just sort of sat in the middle of the screen there. So yeah, a little bit of work to do on the OSD and little bits and pieces, but not too much. I'm going to set up my receiver, and I'm going to check whether I need to change the direction of my motors using BL Heli.
Right, so just in the build thing, this is actually after I just did that Beta Flight video, because I hadn't yet put the top on. I have to say, putting the top on this thing is quite difficult because of the way these line up. It's like you don't want to put the camera on first, because these kind of pull the bits out, so it's kind of tricky to get these aligned to get the actual top on. That took a bizarre amount of time. And what I was noticing after I did Beta Flight is I suddenly thought, how do I change the VTX? And fortunately I noted what type it was, and I'll put a link down below to where you can find the user manual for it, because it's quite useful. But whilst I was looking through the pictures, I noticed that they seem to have their GPS up this way, because I saw that the cable ties were around it, and I thought, oh, they've mounted it up the wrong way, but they hadn't. They've actually mounted it that way, and they're using this hole at the back here. Just going to focus for me. There we go. So you can just see the sort of receiver there. So it doesn't poke on the capacitor that way, but there's not much of the receiver showing, so I was a little bit worried about it. So I mean, the next task is going to be to actually get this out in the garden and make sure we actually get some signal on the GPS. The other thing I did, although I'm still not particularly pleased with it, is redo these solder joints, because they were looking awful, and they were already starting to get metal fatigue because this wire is so stiff. I think it's actually the problem with using the little TS100. It doesn't seem to be able to generate, it can generate the heat, but it can't seem to hold it on a big place like my old sort of fat chiseled edge soldering iron does here. So I redid that with that. I mean, I've got a chisel edge for the TS100, and it's absolutely lovely, except if you're soldering onto really big pieces of sort of flat contact, it doesn't seem to go so well then. So anyway, that's looking a little better, and at least I'm happy they're not just going to break. The VTX, yes, obviously not smart audio, and the reason you need to look at that manual is if I plug this in a sec, you'll just see inside there's an LED, and basically pressing this tiny little button here and holding it down for 2 seconds will take you through sort of channels, frequency, and then power. And trying to set that is quite tricky. Now that wouldn't be a problem. Normally I'd be like, well, I don't normally change my frequency and power. The only thing I might want to do it for is if I'm sort of sat there with this GPS waiting to get signal, I don't want this sitting there on like a high power absolutely roasting. I'd prefer to have it on like, you know, pit mode or at least 25 milliwatts, just so I can let it sit there without overheating too much. But I mean, first thing first is making sure it actually gets a signal in the garden. You will notice that the R9 receiver is on, and I've gone with a horizontal mount there. I was going to try vertical, but I just couldn't get it where I was happy with it. I mean, it's either this bit's going to dig in the ground or it's too close to the prop. So, you know, there's a slight degradation in signal there, but not too bad. The rest of it is pretty much set up, ready to go now. So it's all bound, it's all sorted out on Maiden Flight, it's all connected. Prop's obviously installed. So yeah, let's see if we can actually get it to recognise some satellites. And then once we've done that, we'll think about how to fly it. Now this is recommended on a 5S system. Obviously the motors support 3 to 6S. Don't have anything above a 4S, so it might be the fact that I go with quite a large 4S as a cruiser, or I go with 2 smaller 3Ss in parallel to make a 6S. I'm not sure. It kind of depends what the hover point is going to be on the throttle and the size of the battery. This isn't for me going to be like a real acro quad or anything, and that's why I've got the camera really quite low there in terms of its tilt. So yeah, we'll see what we can do with that once we actually get it to lock into some sats. So let's do that bit next. So you'll notice that the GPS has moved there. Why is that? Well, I had it under there with the antenna poking through as sort of described in the pictures. Left it outside for 6 minutes, didn't get a single GPS. I slid it out so it was protruding from there. Within a minute I had 6 sats in the garden, which says to me it's being blocked. So I thought to myself, rather than move it on top or move it out like that, I'm not intending to run a GoPro, I'll just shove it on top like that. And yeah, instant lock in the garden. So that worked for me. I don't think this situation is very useful there with all the stuff there. There's probably better ways to put it. And I dare say I could fit the GoPro on if I thought about my position a bit more. So it's not a game changer.
Hello, we're back at the field. We've got the Eachine Tyro129 ready to test out. Not the greatest day today, it's a bit blustery, winds up to about 20 miles an hour. It's kind of gusty as well, which is annoying, so I wouldn't expect smoothness. But let's take it for a hover first, then we'll try it out. We're using a little 4S 1800. I didn't have the recommended 5S, didn't have any 6S either, so I thought I'll keep it light, see how it goes. But first thing first, we've got to let it get its satellites, and you see we've got the receiver on top now after not having great success where it was intended to go. Let's try it. Well, I like that positioning. It managed to get 14 satellites in under a minute, so let's just make sure we get a decent hover from it. Pretty nice. One thing I noticed about this is it's pretty quiet despite the larger props. Plenty of punch even though it's a little 4S, and I'm under 50% to get it in the air, so that's good. Yeah, let's FPV this thing, I want to see what happens. So we're off for the maiden flight, and of course my idea here is just to feel how it is, make sure some of the features work. Now I should point out that it's a real old gusty day. The winds are gusting up to around 20 miles an hour, and we're in this situation where we've got these trees around. It tends to be a bit turbulent there. Now I'm not saying this is perfectly tuned or anything, it might be a little bit wobbly, but it's kind of pointless trying to tune it when the whole thing is just being shaken about by the wind. So as far as I can tell, it felt pretty smooth, very responsive, but I had a bunch of quads here and they all sort of shaken about a bit because of the gusts there. So when I get a calmer day, that's the time to try and tune it down there. So as far as the quad goes, as you can see, it's managing to like maintain flight at sort of 23% throttle. The 1800 is pretty lightweight, but this isn't an 1800 that's actually been designed for flying a quad. This is designed for a plane, so you just saw it go low battery when I put the throttle down. It is it's not high C rated at all, so not really suitable for this one. You'd want a much higher C rated battery for this. But I'm just out here, I just want to check one of the features like GPS rescue and I can see that this appears to be fine. Basically it turns around, it starts coming back towards me, and it starts dropping the height. I switch off because I don't want it going over the trees, but yeah, that's pretty good. That's working fine. The quad, I think you can actually sort of rip it around and be quite aggro with it if you really wanted to. For me, it's not kind of what I feel it's for. If I really wanted to rip around and do lots of aggro stuff, there's plenty of 5-inch quads I think could do it better. But you shouldn't be sort of restricted in thinking this is like, you know, a GPS Explorer quad. You can pretty much fly it how you want to. If you'd noticed there's something missing from my OSD, I was kind of feeling the same thing. It's like, where did I put my flight timer? It's not there. Normally I'd have the mode in the middle of the screen at the bottom, and I'd have my flight timer at the right hand side at the bottom. I seem to have completely neglected to put it on, which was a bit of a pain because I kind of wanted to know how long I was going for to sort of work out how well it was doing. Instead I kind of used, while I was flying, the cumulative amount of flight distance, which is that one just underneath the home arrow. So initial impressions are good. The only thing I noted from this flight is I've got a big splodge on the camera lens, and the VTX is running in 25 milliwatts at the moment, and that tends to pick up a little bit of static when going behind some trees that we can maybe avoid by upping the power a bit. So this flight was about 6 minutes until I decided to bring it in and go with a large battery. So when I got back, I thought, did I set the timer up but just not turn it on? Let's try turning it on and see where it appears. Problem was that it was smack bang in the middle of the screen, which isn't going to be really appropriate. But I decided to switch on the GPS coordinates as well, just to show you what those look like. Now when I say larger battery, I still didn't have anything suitable, so the only thing I could find which I thought, well, that might be interesting, I wonder if it'll work, were these 5200 mAh 4S multi-star batteries, which seem awfully heavy, but I thought I'd try it anyway. And here we are flying on that big 5200 mAh 4S. Surprisingly, I thought, you know, I'm going to need sort of 50-60% throttle here, but again, it's still flying at 30 to 40% throttle with no problem and managing to go quite a nice speed. So again, the mission in this one was just to make sure stuff's working. I'm still on 25 milliwatts of power, and I do notice it when I'm going sort of down this end of the field. It's getting a little bit dodgy, and you can kind of see why here, because if we do the turn, we can see that we've lined up perfectly with some trees which are completely blocking my signal. But yeah, the quad still feels absolutely fine. It doesn't feel heavy or sluggish in the air. I can still go and do silly acro maneuvers if I really want to. But the goal here was to just double check a few more times that GPS rescue mode is working fine. So we do the test over here, and initially I thought, is this working? It's kind of facing a funny direction. Initially sort of gets blown around by the wind a bit before it decides to actually come back to me. Starts heading in my direction, starts dropping in altitude, which is all good. At which point I decide to take control back and decide that's working quite well. So what I did in this rest of the battery is basically fly around and around and around, up and down, just seeing how it felt, seeing how the battery worked. Weird thing about multi-stars, again, not designed really for a quad. I'd mostly fly them in my Mini Talon fixed wing. They have a really weird way that they work. They're only a 10C battery, but of course it's a 5200, so there's an amount of amps there. But anyway, they tend to sag very quickly at the start of the flight, but then they will hold a much lower voltage. So I was flying around literally about 6 minutes with it in the 14.8 and just carried on flying. So this flight was a little over 10 minutes, and in that time we did a cumulative distance of just over 10k, which says to me that's pretty good, because if you really wanted to, you could do, you know, 5k out and 5k back, which is quite a long way on a quad like this. So having done all the testing on the GPS rescue mode, I was quite happy that it was working, so set up my failsafe for rescue instead of drop, and I also upped the power on the VTX just to see if that helped me when going around sort of trees and stuff. I haven't gone into great detail here about exactly how you set up GPS rescue and how to test it and things like that. That's because I did a video of it just a few weeks ago, which I'll link to here, and I'm using the same settings as I was in there because I felt they worked okay, and it seemed to work pretty well here. So we're flying here with a little bit more power, and round here was where we tended to get the breakup. As I said, it's a bit of a pain changing the power. This is where I'd really like it to be on smart audio or something, so it wasn't a hassle. I had to take a screwdriver out there with me just to press that little tiny button and make sure I could change it over. Let's see, we're still blocking ourselves, but we've got a better signal there. We're managing to cut through some of it, but you know, you block yourself out at any distance and it's still gonna not look so good, obviously. But you know, just going through trees where you've got gaps between the branches and stuff, you have a nicer experience. This VTX will do all the way up to 600. I think it's got 25, 200, 600. So there is plenty of power there if you want it. I mean, despite its size, you can pretty much fly it like a 5-inch. You can go for your tree gaps, you can go for your acro, as I've said, and it's all fairly good. Not a problem in the world. Of course, I've got GPS rescue on now, so I'm not particularly worried about where I'm going. That said, I'm still making sure I've got adequate RSSI. The R9 here seems to be working okay. The RSSI will drop all over the place sometimes, but generally will fly down to 0. And I'm just enjoying the fact that I can go out here, a place I've never actually flown before really with a quad, and just see what's in these fields. I'm just thinking there are trees quite close around me, so I have to be careful with the angle, not get too low as I go out, because these trees will ultimately block me quite easily. You just have to pick where you're going to go correctly. So this is another interesting spot to have a look at down here, and you can see I'm keeping quite high just to take into account those trees. Again, it's not exactly a smooth ride with these winds, but seems absolutely fine and all good. You can see as well that multi-star's already dropped into the 14s, but it will literally stay there for 10 minutes as you fly around. I can see the building work here. There's several places they've started, but fortunately my little part of the field here where I'm all sort of fenced in is still available at the moment, so I'm taking as much advantage of staying in this field as I can before ultimately bulldozers turn up and chuck me out at some point. But yeah, again, I mean, I won't bore you with the entire flight, but I literally spent another 10 minutes flying around, going up and down, looking around stuff, just having a bit of fun and doing things. I didn't go too far out because what I never like to do is fly where either I don't know or I don't know if I can get to recover it. So you'll see me stopping at where it gets basically into, you know, wood cover or forest or whatever you want to call it, because at that point I don't know if I can get there in the event of having to try and recover it, and I'm unfamiliar with what's over that area, so I'm sticking to the places I want to, which is sort of, you know, 500 meters. If you fly a 500 meter circle around yourself, you've got quite a lot of area to play with. It's actually quite useful for me because previously in this field I was kind of restricted in one bit of it. Since the builders have turned up and taken out some trees, it's kind of opened up slightly. I mean, some of it is still behind fences, which could create some interesting problems if I did crash and have to go and try and find it, but I've got more spots to explore now. I'm quite happy. Anyway, we did another 10-minute flight and another 10k worth of cumulative distance. I'm not saying the multi-star is the way to go here. This is a big battery, and I think too big. I think on 3S you could be looking at somewhere between sort of 3600 to 4000 milliamp hours, and you will get essentially about the same amount of time. So I do think there's a sort of trade-off between weight and the amount of flight time you get out of it. There's a sweet spot somewhere, and I have a feeling it's between sort of 3.5 and 4,000 milliamp hours on the 4S. Of course, if you want to go acro, 5S, 6S might be interesting, and still with the sort of the right 5S, that might be a good endurance one. I just haven't got the range of batteries to try that out, but I'm quite pleased that I could fly it on a 4S, and even a huge 4S, you can still see that the amount of throttle I'm using is fairly minimal to what you get. Anyway, I brought this down after that fairly long flight, and everything's good. Felt this was the most interesting of all the Tyro build it yourself so far.
Well, I really quite like this. Kind of depends what sort of flying you like to do that. I wanted something where I could fly around for like a good 10 minutes and just mess around and look at stuff, but not in a more boring, just fly straight and level like a sort of DJI quad. So still something you could mess around with, but would stay in the air. And this sort of fulfills the purpose for me there. It's certainly the best of the Tyros I've come across so far, and was the easiest to put together, despite the 11-page PDF document describing itself as the manual. There's really only about half a page which is any use, and that's where it basically says what screws to put where, and then the rest of it you kind of have to work out for yourself. Obviously as well, the GPS position they suggested didn't work for me, so I put it in my own place. The rest of it's pretty good. The camera was surprisingly good. The only thing I would have liked to have seen was smart audio on the VTX, because you might be in a situation where you're sat on the floor for 5 minutes waiting for SATs to get there, and you don't really want a VTX on high power, and it is a pain to change. Aside from that though, it was really good. I thought it flew very nicely. Obviously I'll be back in some calmer conditions to see if it needs any tuning, but the fact it was like suggests it's like a 5S battery but could take a 6S, and I flew it with a massive stupid 4S and it was still absolutely fine, kind of blew me away a bit. So yes, I'm liking this. I think it's very keenly priced as well. You get a lot for the money. Really like the GPS. I've said it before though, don't rely on it. It's not like a DJI product where it will just come back and land. The GPS in Beta Flight is a whole different story. But yeah, I like it. I like it a lot, and I can imagine myself flying this quite a bit, just because it's nice to get up there and chill out and not have to think about landing every 3 minutes, which I really like. Anyway, this is the Tyro129. You will of course have to build it yourself, supply your own receiver, but aside from that, it's got all the bits in there you need. It was kindly supplied for review by Banggood. Thanks Banggood, and there will of course be links down below for a way you can get this or check it out for more details. Hope that's been helpful, and I'll catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.